Okay, so having finished talking about the trolley case, we're going to talk about our last topic of the semester. And that last topic is going to be studying the philosophical views of Immanuel Kant. So once we're done with Kant, I'll have some wrap-up thoughts, and then we'll be done. So um, you should have the handout 2.3 out. Okay, and so now here's the thing about Kant and from the reading is if you'll notice, I didn't actually assign Kant himself. Um, why is that? Kant has a reputation for being very difficult to understand. The way people joked in my undergraduate classes, you can't understand him. Okay, sorry. I'm really sorry. Okay, sorry about that. But yeah, so, and actually for this intro level class, I'm okay with just you guys getting the general idea of Kant's thinking. Um, Normally among ethical objectivists, people tend to go either the consequentialist or utilitarian route, or they go the Kantian route, or they try to mix them in some way. That's going to be my final video, how we might mix these in some way. So anyway, let's dive in and talk about Kant. First, to understand Kant, you want to understand the idea of an imperative. Now, an imperative is just what it means when someone says an imperative is a claim about what you ought or should or must do. When I took Spanish, we learned the word deber, and deber was should, ought, must, owe. You know what? It like has a number of meanings, and ought, should, must, obligated. All of those are kind of in one package, and an imperative is a claim about what you ought, should, or must do. Okay, so now we want to distinguish between two types of imperatives. And by the way, this isn't in the reading. This is just from the lecture, although one part will be in the reading. I'll point it to you. So in the handout, first I talk about a hypothetical imperative, which is like this. Hypothetical imperatives always have like an if in it. You might even call it like a conditional imperative. So if you want X, then you ought to do Y. So the two blanks in your handout are going to be want and ought. So if you want to become a nurse, then you ought to go to college. Okay. Now the thing about hypothetical imperatives is they depend on what the person themselves want. So I mean, it's not It's not the case that I should go to college or just anybody should go to college. But if you want to become a nurse, then you should go to college. If you want to become a philosophy professor, then you should go to philosophy graduate school. But I wouldn't say that for a lot of you. A lot of you don't want to become philosophy professors. So hypothetical imperatives depend on what you want. Sometimes when you're giving advice to people and you're not sure like what they really should do, sometimes it's good to ask them, well, what do you want? And then you find out what they want. Oh, I think I want to get married at a certain point and have this sort of job that pays this sort of amount, but I want to work with people, but have some time, blah, blah, blah. Once you figure out what they want, then you can figure out, okay, here's what you should do. You should take these light steps. You should try to go to this college. You should interact with these sorts of people and so forth. So that's hypothetical imperative. Next is a categorical imperative. Categorical imperative, you ought to do Y, and that's independent of your desire. So there's no if to it. You just ought to do Y. So like we said, like somebody said, you should go to philosophy graduate school. You should go to nursing school. You should do X or Y. Okay, all of those shoulds really depend on our desires and what we want to do. But a categorical imperative is something you ought to do, and it doesn't matter what you desire. Let's say somebody is like thinking about robbing a bank or even committing murder or doing something horrible. You don't ask them, is that what you want to do? I mean, you could, but the point about a categorical imperative is, it doesn't depend on what you want to do. You just should not rob a bank, and you just should not kill anybody. You should not, there's a lot of things you should not do. You shouldn't cheat. You shouldn't lie. You shouldn't backstab your friend, etc. So now, categorical imperatives, if you're following along in the handout, so there are different types of imperatives, and the way Kant thought of things is hypothetical imperatives, they're not necessarily connected to morality. I mean, it's not the case that you should become a nurse. That depends on what you want. It's the categorical imperatives that are also the the claims of morality, of the moral law that we've been seeking and trying to understand in this class. So so Kant's interest is categorical imperatives, not hypothetical imperatives, and that's going to be the topic for Kant. So, all right.